Underpowered, overweight, slow, and clunky. All these flaws made the Brewster SB2A Buccaneer one of the most dysfunctional aircraft of World War II. The plane had a controversial development from the start, and these routes condemned it to failure after failure. Deficient performance and handling once it entered service never allowed the SB2A to redeem itself. The plane was conceived as a single-engine light bomber that could hold 2 crew members, a pilot and a gunner. Built by Brewster Aeronautical Corporation, the objective was to use it as a carrier and scout dive bomber. The company's work on the aircraft was deemed mediocre at best. Ongoing problems with the workforce and overall management proved unsuitable for producing American fighters from the ground up. Although the Buccaneer was American-made, it was poorly received by the U.S. Navy, Air Force, and the Marine Corps. Overseas, opinions differed little. French, English, Dutch, and Australian pilots despised the Buccaneer. The aircraft saw minimal use during the first years of the war and was quickly ditched by armed forces worldwide. Sometimes just after leaving production, the new planes went straight to the scrapyard or the target practice fields. There's a good reason few have heard of Brewster today. Before the United States entered World War II in 1939, the U.S. Navy began a program to develop larger scout planes and bombers that could operate directly from Navy carriers. Tensions were rising in the Pacific with the violent Japanese campaigns taking over Asia, and the U.S. wanted to be ready if the conflict came to their territory. Military reforms and procurement in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Corps were already underway when war broke out in Europe. Brewster Aeronautical Corporation was the company chosen to develop the aircraft the Navy desired as part of this pre-war buildup. Based in Long Island, New York, the Brewster had its origins in 1932 as a manufacturer of seaplane floats and tail surfaces. As the company established itself in the market, it began designing and constructing a whole aircraft. Their first plane designs were the SB2A, a 2-seat scout bomber that first flew in 1936, and the F2A2, a fighter aircraft that entered production in 1938, a year before World War II broke out. However, after these initial achievements, the company underwent internal difficulties that worsened as production ramped up. It was poorly run, and frequently unable to deliver under a deadline. More importantly, it couldn't provide the quality required to assure the effectiveness of every single aircraft that was produced. It was ranked number 84 among the most valuable American military production companies of the Second World War. It was a puzzling choice by the Navy, given the company's unexpected and quick rise from a humble plane parts supplier to a full-fledged aircraft contractor. As the workforce deteriorated with millions of Americans conscripted to serve in the armed forces, new workers could not catch up with training, leading to mediocre work and slow production. The company was taken over by the Navy in 1942, ultimately shutting down in 1946, after the war had finished. Insufficient standards and lack of continuity were two of the main reasons that led the Buccaneer to be an utter failure in almost every aspect since it began pre-production. In the first months of 1939, the U.S. Navy Bureau of Aeronautics launched a program to develop bombers that could operate from the Navy's carriers. Based on Brewster's previous works, the SB2A and the F2A2, the company was chosen to create the prototype. The SB2A was a 2-seat mid-wing monoplane scout bomber with folding wings and retractable landing gear. The rear gunner was equipped with a machine gun that could be used as a defensive weapon against enemy planes that tried to flank the aircraft. The plane also featured an internal bomb bay that could accommodate a 500-pound bomb. Equipped with an engine that could achieve a top speed of 254 miles per hour, the estimated range was 1,000 miles at cruising speed. The Model 340, A new and more powerful prototype of the SB2A was to be created to satisfy the Navy's request. It was designated XSB2A1. Like the Brewster SB2A1, the newer version also featured a single engine with an all-metal mid-wing layout. The Buccaneer could carry 1,000 pounds of explosives, doubling the original model's payload. It would use a standard tail and retractable suspension. The Buccaneer was to operate with a crew of 2, a pilot and a rear gunner. The cockpit would be placed under a greenhouse-style canopy that would include sliding sections that could be opened and provide an excellent view. The new engine was a Wright Cyclone R2600 with a 3-bladed propeller that was far more powerful than the one used for the previous model. This engine could deliver 1,700 horsepower and could drive the plane to speeds of up to 275 miles per hour. Armament was composed of 2 50-caliber M2 Browning heavy machine guns placed in the fuselage. 4 M1919 Browning medium machine guns were placed on the wings, and the rear gunner was equipped with 2 30-caliber machine guns. A rotary turret feature with 2 7.62mm machine guns was ditched. Already overloaded, there was no more space left for placing a piston engine that could power the turret. The bomb bay was operated by 2 flaps that closed after dropping the load. It could hold 1 bomb of 500 pounds on each side. 2 fuel tanks were located in different locations across the fuselage. The first tank was directly below the cabin, and the other one was near the engine fireblock. It also had a 47-foot wingspan, was 39 feet in length, and had a height of 15 feet. Overall, the design, armament, and fuel capacity were typical for the time. The Buccaneer was supposed to have a range of 1,675 miles, with a service of 25,000 feet, both considered rather remarkable. The weight, nonetheless, would be one of the most significant drawbacks to the Buccaneer. It had a takeoff weight of 14,286 pounds and an empty weight of 9,921 pounds. Such heaviness meant that it could never achieve its lofty range and altitude goals. The Buccaneer had its first flight on June 17, 1941. At this point in the fight against the Axis powers, it had already become obsolete due to the war's fast-evolving nature, as technology was subject to change every day. Nevertheless, the Buccaneer had more than 900 orders placed by the U.S. Navy, Great Britain, and France, and they had to be fulfilled. Problems grew once the first units arrived at the various armies that ordered the Buccaneer. The R-2600 engine, although powerful, proved to be too heavy for the aircraft. This made it overweight, slow, and unreliable. Plane and engine proved to be incompatible, making it unsuitable for combat. Pilots complained that the controls felt cumbersome and sluggish. The plane overall felt slow and unstable. Royal Air Force units quickly labeled the imported American aircraft as worthless for combat missions. In July 1942, after tests conducted by British pilots, Australia and New Zealand canceled their orders. The U.S. Navy and the Marine Corps had to take those orders and find a use for the underperforming planes. Roy Edwards, an aviation enthusiast posting on aviastar.org, recounted that he witnessed many of the ongoing problems the Buccaneer suffered when growing up as a boy in Vero Beach, Florida. He reported, quote, "We lived close enough to the base to be able to climb up in our treehouse and watch the traffic coming and going on runway 29L. After the SB2A's arrival, the accidents became almost a daily occurrence. The plane had many problems, but the hydraulic system was a maintenance nightmare and the cause of the landing gear problems. The braking system failures also caused quite a few landing accidents. Our treehouse almost got taken out by one of the SB2As when he had an engine failure trying to get lined up with the runway and ended up stalling and crashing about a block north of us." He further added, quote, "3 of us kids were the first on the crash site and thought we could help rescue the 2 guys on board. But the plane was in pieces. and the flames were too intense to get close. After various modifications, the Buccaneers were used as training aircraft. Still, most of them went directly to the scrapyard as soon as they left production. The U.S. Navy even considered the plane was unable to fulfill trainer purposes for novice pilots. The Marine Corps used it as part of a night fighter squadron in Florida, but the SB2A never saw combat in any global conflict theater. The U.S. Army Air Force viewed the plane as a hack model, meaning it had little utility beyond running airfield errands. Other variants of the SB2A incorporated various changes that did not alter the mediocre performance. The ex-SB2A1 was the original unarmed prototype. The SB2A1 was the version that featured the rotatable back tower with 4 7.62mm Colt machine guns that never was produced. The SB2A2 had no hinged wings. This model was ordered by the Royal Air Force, which designated the plane as Bermuda Mark I. The SB2A3 was for use on aircraft carriers, with hinged wings and hooks. Lastly, the SB2A4 was the model used as training aircraft. It featured minor modifications that improved performance by a small margin. In the end, the ultimate failure of the Brewster SB2A Buccaneer was not entirely because of its design and components, but rather for the company's ongoing problems with quality, poor management, and worker strikes. While the Buccaneer brought many innovations on paper, such as the inclusion of a rear rotary turret that was fully mobile, Brewster was just unable to execute. By the time the aircraft finished production, air warfare had evolved anyway. New standards were required for fighters that needed to rely more on speed and mobility for optimal combat capacities. If the Buccaneer had finished production earlier, immediate modifications could have possibly changed its grim future as a trainer destined to the scrapyard. Nearly 1,000 orders for the Buccaneer were placed, but only 770 were built during 1941 and 1944. Just 2 Buccaneers have survived the scrapyard. One of them is found at the National Naval Museum in Pensacola, Florida, and the other at the Pima Air and Space Museum in Tucson, Arizona.